Hello, and welcome to this tech tip from Will. In this tech tip, I will be looking at the three different interfaces that are available in Windows Server 2012 and Windows Server 2012 R2. I will start by explaining what the three interfaces are and how they came about. I will also explain the differences between the interfaces and why you may opt for a particular interface. And finally, later on in the video, I will show you the three different interfaces on my Windows Server 2012 R2 server and will demonstrate how to change from one interface to another interface. So let's get started. To understand the different interfaces a little better, let's take a brief history lesson and go back to the days of Windows Server 2003. With Windows Server 2003 and earlier, when you first installed the operating system, you were not given a choice of interface. That is, when you installed Windows Server 2003, you were given a full graphical user interface, including a desktop, taskbar, start menu, etc. This was the only interface available, and there was nothing you could do to change it. With the release of Windows Server 2008 and Windows Server 2008 R2, Microsoft started to give administrators a choice of interface. When you install either Windows Server 2008 or Windows Server 2008 R2, the installation wizard will ask you to choose your preferred interface, either a full interface or a server core interface. The full interface gave you the full graphical interface found in Windows Server 2003 and earlier, giving you access to the traditional desktop, Windows Explorer, administration tools, so on and so forth. The server core interface, however, was very different. If you installed Windows Server 2008 or Windows Server 2008 R2 using the server core interface, when the installation completes, all you were given was a command line. Simply put, Server Core is essentially a Windows Server operating system that is administered entirely from the command line and by using Windows PowerShell. At first glance, Server Core does look and sound a little daunting, but there are some genuine advantages to using it. First, Server Core is less resource intensive. That is, a Windows server running a server core interface uses less CPU and RAM than a server running a full interface. This is because the graphical components of the operating system that require these additional resources are no longer present. Second, Server Core requires less disk space than a full interface. Since Server Core has very few graphical components and administration tools, these components aren't installed. This reduces the amount of disk space required by the operating system. According to Microsoft, when Windows is installed using Server Core, the installation is approximately 4 GB smaller than a full installation. And finally, Server Core is actually more secure than a full interface. Since there are a lot of interface components that aren't installed with Server Core, there is effectively less software running on the server. As such, there are fewer vulnerabilities for an attacker to exploit. With Windows Server 2008 and Windows Server 2008 R2, network administrators had to choose their preferred interface carefully, since it was not possible to change it later on. That is, if you chose to install the operating system with a full interface, you could not then change this to a server core interface. Likewise, if you installed with a server core interface, you could not change over to the full interface. The only way to change the interface was to completely reinstall the operating system. With Windows Server 2012 and Windows Server 2012 R2, Microsoft continued to offer the full and server core interfaces, but also added an additional interface called the minimal interface. The minimal interface is neither full nor server core, but is somewhere in between. The minimal interface was designed for administrators who want the benefits of server core but do not want to give up the entire graphical user interface. With the minimal interface, certain graphical elements of the operating system are removed, including the desktop, taskbar, start screen, Internet Explorer, and File Explorer. What you are essentially left with is Server Manager, Command Prompt, and Windows PowerShell. Since Windows Server 2012 and Windows Server 2012 R2 can be almost entirely managed using Server Manager, most administrators should be comfortable using the minimal interface. According to Microsoft, a server running a minimal interface is approximately 300 megabytes smaller than a server with a full interface. Another improvement added to Windows Server 2012 and Windows Server 2012 R2 is the ability to switch between the different interfaces without having to reinstall the operating system. For instance, if you installed Windows Server 2012 with a full interface, there is nothing stopping you from switching the interface to a server core or a minimal interface. Likewise, if you installed the operating system with a server core interface, you can just as easily switch this over to a full or a minimal interface. The ability to switch the interfaces whenever you like makes the deployment and security of servers much easier. For instance, there is nothing stopping an administrator from installing Windows Server 2012 with a full interface, configuring the server as required, and then changing the interface over to server core to reap the benefits. This brings us to the next topic of choosing the right interface for you. The best choice of interface depends entirely on what your needs are. As with earlier editions, Windows Server 2012 and Windows Server 2012 R2 allows you to install roles that add functionality to the server. However, not all roles are supported in every interface. With the full and minimal interfaces, every role offered by Windows Server 2012 and Windows Server 2012 R2 is supported. However, if you opt for a server core interface, some roles are not available. With Windows Server 2008 R2, only 10 of the server roles could be used in server core. With Windows Server 2012 and Windows Server 2012 R2, Microsoft has increased this to 12 roles. Server Core supports the following roles: Active Directory Certificate Services, Active Directory Domain Services, Active Directory Lightweight Directory Services, Active Directory Rights Management Services, DHCP, DNS, File and Storage Services, Hyper-V, Print and Document Services, Remote Access, Web Server IIS, and Windows Server Update Services. The following roles are not supported in Server Core: Active Directory Federation Services, Application Server, Fax Server, Network Policy and Access Services, Remote Desktop Services, Volume Activation Services, and Windows Deployment Services. If you plan to use any of these roles on your server, Server Core is not the right choice of interface for you. Let's now take a closer look at the different interfaces. To do this, I will, in my lab environment, deploy one server running Windows Server 2012 R2. The first interface I will show you is the full interface, which supports every role, every feature, and comes with every available administration tool. Next, I will show you how to strip out some of the graphical components to the interface and will reduce the server to the minimal interface. Once in the minimal interface, I will show you some of the features missing from the interface. Afterwards, I will strip out what remains of the graphical components and will reduce the interface even further to a server core interface. So I will now change over to my bare metal server. Currently, this server does not have an operating system installed. I have inserted my Windows Server 2012 R2 installation DVD into the server and have booted from it. Notice, as I enter through the installation wizard, I will be asked to select the operating system you want to install. As you can see, I have a choice of Windows Server 2012 R2 Standard Server Core Installation and Windows Server 2012 R2 Standard Server with a GUI. If I select the Server Core installation, this will install Windows Server 2012 R2 with a Server Core interface. This will essentially give me a command prompt and PowerShell interface to administer my server. If I select Server with a GUI, this will give me the full interface. Of course, you may be asking at this point, well, what happened to the minimal interface? Interestingly, the minimal interface is not available during the initial installation of the operating system. To use the minimal interface, you will have to select either Server Core or Server with a GUI and then convert the installation to a minimal interface. Later on in the video, I will demonstrate how this is done. For now, I will select Windows Server 2012 R2 Standard Server with a GUI so that we get the full interface that most administrators are familiar with. I will then accept the license terms, select Custom Installation, select the only drive available to me, and will install Windows. I have now finished installing Windows Server 2012 R2. Since this is the full interface that most of us have come to know and love, absolutely everything is included in the installation, including the desktop, taskbar, server manager, file explorer, and the start screen. Also, if I quickly open Control Panel, notice that every single applet and tool in Control Panel is available to me. I will now close out of all these windows and will return to my desktop. There are two ways to change the interface in Windows Server 2012 and Windows Server 2012 R2. The first method is to use Server Manager, and the second is to use PowerShell. During this demonstration, I will show you how to do this using both methods. In the description of this video, I will post all of the commandlets you need to change your interface if you prefer to use PowerShell. To start with, I will open Server Manager. From the top right corner, select Manage, and then Remove Roles and Features from the drop-down list. This opens the Remove Roles and Features wizard. From here, I will next my way through to the Remove Features screen. From here, if I scroll down through the list of features, notice that I have a feature named User Interfaces and Infrastructure. If I expand this out, I will get a few sub-options. The first option, Graphical Management Tools and Infrastructure, is essentially all of the tools that can be used to administer the server from a graphical interface, such as Server Manager, the Microsoft Management Console, and some control panel applets. The last option, Server Graphical Shell, provides graphical support for the remaining GUI components, such as the desktop, start screen, File Explorer, and Internet Explorer. You may also have noticed that there is a third option, Desktop Experience, listed. This option adds tools that are normally found on a desktop computer running Windows 8 or Windows 8.1, but are not traditionally installed on server computers. These tools include Windows Media Player, Windows Slideshow, the Snipping tool, and the Windows Store, just to name a few. Most servers have no need for these tools, which is why they are removed by default. If you want to make your server look and feel more like a desktop computer, this is the feature to install. Since these tools are removed by default, I will skip past them and will make no further reference to them. If I wanted to change the full interface into a server core interface, I would have to remove both the Server Graphical Shell and the Graphical Management Tools feature. This will effectively strip out all of the GUI interfaces and administration tools, leaving just the command prompt and Windows PowerShell tools. For now though, I want to convert this server to a minimal interface. To achieve this, the only feature I have to remove is the Server Graphical Shell feature. This will remove some of the GUI interfaces and tools, but not all of them. I will then click Next. To change the interface, all I have to do is click Remove, and then reboot the server. When the server boots back up, it will have the minimal interface. Instead, I will cancel out of the wizard and will close Server Manager so that I can show you how to achieve the same results using Windows PowerShell. First, I will open Windows PowerShell. Since I am using Windows Server 2012 R2, I will enter the commandlet remove Windows feature. If you are using Windows Server 2012, you should use the Uninstall-WindowsFeature commandlet instead. Next, I will add the name switch, followed by Server-GUI-Shell. And finally, I will add the restart switch. This will reboot the server automatically once the command completes. If I press Enter, Windows will start to remove the interfaces from the server. This may take a couple of minutes to complete. After a short wait, the server will reboot. When the server boots back up, I will log back in. Although Server Manager has opened automatically, look what happens when I minimize it. As you can see, things don't quite look the same. This is the minimal interface. There is no desktop, taskbar, start button, or charms. All I have to administer the server is Server Manager, a command prompt, and PowerShell if I want it. There are also no File Explorer or Internet Explorer tools. Although this interface may look a little scary, most network administrators should be able to cope with it, since most tasks on Windows Server 2012 and Windows Server 2012 R2 can be accomplished using Server Manager. Through Server Manager, you can still access the regular administration tools that you would also have used in the full interface under the Tools menu. I will now select Manage and will select Remove Roles and Features so that I can demonstrate how to strip out the remaining GUI tools and convert the minimal interface to a server core interface. Once again, I will next my way through the Remove Roles and Features wizard until I arrive at the Remove Features screen. Here, I will scroll down through the list of features and will expand User Interfaces and Infrastructure. To convert this server to Server Core, I am required to remove the Graphical Management Tools and Infrastructure feature. Removing this feature effectively removes what remains of the graphical interface, giving you the most basic interface possible. I will then click Next. To remove the features, simply click Remove and then reboot the server. Once again though, I will close out of the wizard and will minimize Server Manager so that I can show you how to remove the feature using Windows PowerShell. From the command prompt, I will first enter the command PowerShell. This will open a Windows PowerShell prompt. If, like me, you are using Windows Server 2012 R2, enter the commandlet remove Windows feature. If, however, you are using Windows Server 2012, you should again use the Uninstall-WindowsFeature commandlet instead. Next, add the name switch and Server-Gui-Mgmt-Infra. Once again, I will also add the restart switch to automatically reboot the server afterwards. If I press Enter, Windows will start the process of removing the feature. Again, this may take a couple of minutes to complete. Eventually, the server will reboot again. When the server comes back up, I will again be prompted to log in. If I enter my login credentials, all that remains of my server interface is a command prompt. This is the Server Core interface. All the remaining graphical tools from the minimal interface, such as Server Manager and the Server Administration tools, are gone. Now, all I have to administer the server is a command prompt and Windows PowerShell. To change the Server Core interface to either a full or a minimal interface, you have no choice but to use PowerShell, since no other tools are available. To do this, I will, on my command prompt, enter the command PowerShell. This opens a Windows PowerShell prompt. From here, I will enter the commandlet Install-WindowsFeature, followed by the name switch and Server-Gui-Mgmt-Infra. If you want to convert your Server Core interface to a minimal interface, this is the only feature you have to install. However, if you wish to convert Server Core to a full interface, then you should also add the Server-Gui-Shell feature. To finish the command, add the restart switch. Windows PowerShell will start to add the required features for the full Windows Server 2012 interface. This may take a few minutes to complete. When the command does complete, the server will reboot. At next boot up, if I log back into the server, you will notice that my full server interface has been restored, including Server Manager, the desktop, taskbar, start button, etc. This concludes this tech tip on the different interfaces of Windows Server 2012 and Windows Server 2012 R2. I hope you have enjoyed this tech tip from us. For more Windows Server 2012 and Windows Server 2012 R2 tech tips, please feel free to browse our collection of videos on YouTube. To help make it possible for us to continue to produce these videos, remember to like our videos, comment on them, and subscribe to our channel. Many thanks, and we'll see you on the next tech tip.